Okay, so we are going to finish off our bread. This sat overnight in the refrigerator. So you can see we have a really nice rise. It was just that ball of dough when we first started. We have a really nice rise. I let it come to room temperature, and now we're just gonna kind of let it ooze out. I'm gonna pop this lid off, make my life a little bit easier. We're just gonna let it ooze out of there. Give it a little pull. And this just takes a minute, little love. Okay, there it is. So, like I said before, I do like this recipe because it doesn't call for any extra oil, so it's really simple to work with. So at this point, we have some nice air in our dough, and we don't want to get rid of all that air. We want to keep as much of it as we can. And so what's going to happen is I'm actually going to make these into roll sizes because we're going to use this bread to make Philly cheesesteaks, which are going to be really good. So I have a little cheat tool that I like to use, but you can just rip this dough apart in order to make the different loaves or different rolls. In this case, I'm going to make 8 rolls, but this can also make 2 loaves. So for Christmas, my mom bought us these giant pizza cutter things, and I found that it works absolutely fantastic for dough. So I'm actually going to use it to cut my dough. I'm going to cut it in half. And then you can see it just pulls apart into that half. Okay? And then I'm going to cut this in half and in half again. That gives me 4 rolls. And I still have to pull it a little bit, but it's not anything major. And now I'm just gonna shape it. So I'm gonna kind of push underneath to make that roll the shape that I want it to be. And I'm gonna use, this is just some basic cornmeal. And so I'm going to sprinkle my pan with some cornmeal. That's gonna help it to not stick, and it's gonna give it a nice crunchy bottom, which is always good. And it's just a really light dusting. It's not like a ton. Like, I know it probably looked like I put a ton on there, but really I just did a really light dusting. Can you see that? Yeah, it's not much at all. Okay, so I'm gonna take my now rounded and elongated, because I like it hoagie style. So it's kind of round and elongated, and I still have all that beautiful air in there. And I'm just gonna kind of set that out on the tray, and it's gonna actually rise right on the tray now. And I'm gonna do that with each one of these rolls. You know, I was talking to Nicholas, he's my senior in high school, and he absolutely loves making the dough. He said that it was really relaxing and enjoyable, and of course he really loves bread, so there's that added benefit at the end. So really what you're trying to do is you're giving it its shape. This is what you want your roll to look like at the end. It's still gonna rise a little bit more because we're gonna do our second rise. So you gotta kind of think about what do you want that shape to look like. And another important thing to think about is any part fatter than another one, right? Because if you have a skinny part and then you have a fat part, it's not gonna cook the same and it's not gonna cook evenly. So you wanna make sure, I need a little flour on my hands apparently. You wanna make sure that it's pretty even as far as its size goes so that you don't have to worry about that. So I need a little flour, it's kind of sticking to my hand, so I'm just gonna dunk them in. That's all the more I want, just a very light dusting. And now I can work with and manipulate that dough, and it's not gonna stick to me nonstop. But again, we're not trying to add any flour to the dough, so we wanna keep that as minimal as possible. We're just trying to keep it from sticking to us. Now I only put 4 rolls on a tray or 1 loaf on a tray. And so you can see here, that's what they look like, little elongated rows. Set that over on the stove top. And now I'm going to take my other dough and cut it into 4. Again, trying to keep it as even as you can. And I just pick up one at a time, maintaining as much air as I can, giving it its shape. Ooh, I almost stuck it on there without any cornmeal. It would stick then, I bet. And if you don't have cornmeal, you could probably use just a little bit of flour. Just don't go too crazy because that raw flour taste isn't gonna have a nice flavor. So just keep it as minimal as possible on the raw flour, okay? If you have a box of Jiffy corn muffin mix, you could totally use that. And just give it a nice little shape here. Get it kind of elongated and lay it on the tray. Quick, easy, simple. So obviously when you're manipulating this dough, you will have some air come out, and that's okay. And that's part of what we do the second rise for. And our last one. And if you wanted to, you could put a little bit of flour, like in a little bowl, you know, if you don't want to stick your hands in the whole container of it, and that would be fine. Let's be real, I'm kind of lazy. I don't want to make a bigger mess than I have to. I want to keep this as simple as possible. So one thing that'll happen is sometimes as it's sitting here, it'll settle a little bit, and you'll find one end looks more a little fatter than the other, and that's what just happened to this one. So I'm just kind of pinching it a little bit to squeeze it so that it's the same width all the way around, and then push it on the top, and that just kind of helps me make sure that I've got it nice and even, and that I don't have any fat bottoms, right? Keep it nice and tight there. All right, so now we have to do our second rise. So one of the things that is really important when it comes to bread is the temperature of the air and the amount of airflow that's actually happening in the room. So this is one of those things that took me a long time to figure out. So there's 2 ways that you can do this. You can cover these with a towel, which for sure I'm going to do that. And you can either leave them on the counter or you can stick them in the oven while the oven is off. Okay, that's super important. The oven has to be off. And what that does is it just makes it so that there's absolutely no change in the airflow around your dough. And that's going to help it to rise better. If you have a lot of airflow around your dough, then it doesn't rise as evenly, and sometimes it'll slow down, especially if it's cool air. Like right now it's pretty cool outside, so if somebody were to open this back door, it would gush cool air through here, and it would stunt the yeast development inside the dough. So by placing it in the oven, it doesn't matter how many times these kids come in and out and bring the air with them, it's still going to be the same regular temperature in the oven with no change. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put these in the oven with a towel over the top of it. Don't cook your towel. And then just before I'm ready to bake it, so in about an hour, I'm going to bring those out along with the towel, and then I'll preheat my oven to 475. So I'm going to go ahead and let these set, and then I'll be back and see you soon. Okay, so now we finished our second rise, and hopefully you saw the picture or the image that came across the video, and it shows that they've just kind of got a really nice plumpness to it. One of the things I forgot to mention earlier is that part of the reason that you cover it with the towel is so that it doesn't develop a skin on the outside, because that skin can be very unpleasant. We want a nice crunchy bread when we do an artisan bread, but we don't want that skin because that's really not the same thing. So now I need to just give a quick slash on my rolls. I do 2 slashes on the rolls, 2 small slashes. When I do a loaf, I do between 3 and 4, depending on how long the loaf is. And that just kind of helps allow it to expand, because once we put it in the oven, it's going to start to expand. and then vent any excess moisture that it needs to vent out. So Tupperware has this great knife sharpener, super easy to use, and it can do both straight blades and serrated blades. I use this thing all the time. I absolutely love it. When I go to work with bread, I like a super sharp knife. So I always sharpen my knife right away before. So you can see this is what it looks like, and you just open it up like this, and then you'll put it on the counter like this. And then on the top, you can see right here, this is for your straight blades, and then see the little jaggedy part, that's for your serrated blades. So I use mine a lot, love, love, love it. So I'm just gonna take my knife and I'm gonna go from heel to tip. And I do that about 10 to 20 times, I don't know, somewhere in there. Just so that I have a really nice sharp blade to cut my bread. And it just makes it so that it doesn't snag the bread. Because what'll happen is if you use a dull knife, it'll snag the dough and make it so that it doesn't hold that beautiful shape. Give it a couple more here. Okay. And then you want to make sure before you use it that you give it a good wipe, because basically you're taking little metal pieces or metal shavings off of that blade in order to sharpen it, and you don't want any of that in your dough. Okay, so I'm just going to take my knife and give it a couple of quick slashes here. And with a knife that is sharp, it goes really super fast. And I've got my oven currently preheating to 475 degrees. Remember, do not preheat your oven while you're still rising your dough. And this does call for a pretty hot oven. 475 is pretty hot. But there is a trick to getting that really beautiful crunchy outside. All right, and the trick is, let me show you. I just created my slashes. They're just small, and they cut across the top of that dough. So the trick to creating that really beautiful, really nice crust is to bake with water. So I'm going to use one of Tupperware's Ultra Pro pans because I love these and I use them for everything. But this is the Ultra Pro lasagna pan. Once upon a time, this used to be Ultra 21, if you're familiar with Tupperware. But this is just the lasagna pan. So it's basically like a cake size pan. And you can use the lid separate if you want. If you're actually using this for something else, you could turn the lid upside down and you could put like, I don't know, green beans on the top and then roast potatoes on the bottom. So you can cook in tandem. You can do it in the microwave first and then finish it in the oven. So there's just a lot you can do with this. For this case though, we're gonna use it as a water bath. Whoa. So we're just gonna take and we're gonna fill it about a third of the way full with water. That's it. Right? It doesn't even take that much. See if I can show you. Oh, I don't know if you can see it. Yeah. Right? So there's, I don't know. It's filled about a centimeter deep. It's not very deep. So what's going to happen is I'm going to put this in the oven on the bottom. And it's going to heat up with my oven, which my oven's already at 365. So it's going, but it's going to heat up with the oven, and then once it comes to temperature, that's when I'm going to put my bread in, but not before. You don't want your bread to start to cook at the lower temperature. It's super important that you preheat your oven, and then once it's preheated with that water in there, it's going to have steam in there, and that steam is going to help develop your bread, and it's going to help give it that really nice crunchy, chewy, not crunchy, more of a chewy crust, which is what makes artisan bread so yummy. So then that's going to cook in the oven for 20 to 30 minutes, depending on whether you're doing rolls, whether you're doing a loaf, or if your oven cooks hot or low. So I find that I like to do the rolls for about 20 to 25 minutes because my oven cooks a little low. And then my loaves, I almost always have to do 30 minutes, again, because my oven cooks a little low. So you might be 25 to 30 minutes. But just keep an eye on it. And I'll show you when they come out what they should look like. Have a really pretty golden brown on them, and then they should be much lighter to the touch, and you should be able to tap on it. It should sound hollow. So those are kind of the things that you're looking for. So I'm gonna pop these in the oven, and I'll see you when they're done. Okay guys, our bread is out of the oven. We have these beautiful rolls, and I'm just gonna kind of show you, they're still really warm. Woo, warm. But they have a beautiful rise to them. They came up really high. You can see here I cut this one just a little bit deep, and so it burst a little bit. But it has a beautiful, nice rise to it. And then we'll cut these in half and make these into a sandwich. You can kind of hear, especially on the bottom, you can hear how it's hollow on the inside, and we've got a nice browning on the underside, and they're really lightweight. And so you can see it's got just this gorgeous color to it, but it's not dark. Like sometimes what you'll see, and pardon my hair, it's a mess, it's been a long day, but part of what you'll see is that this gets, if you over bake it, it'll get a much deeper brown, and basically what that means is it's finished cooking and then it continued to cook even more, and it's creating an even thicker crust layer, which especially when you're doing the rolls, it becomes too much and you don't have enough of that real soft inside that you want. But this nice khaki tan color, that's what you want. And the real important part is to make sure that the bottom is browned, so it's not pale at all, and then you get that empty thump. Okay, all right, so I am going to finish making the rest of our dinner. We're going to be having some Philly cheesesteak is what we're making out of this. So I'm gonna finish the rest of my dinner and smell this wonderful bread. It smells so good. And I hope you guys have a ton of success making bread. And if you do have questions, please feel free to ask. Lord knows I have messed up bread so many times. And I'm happy to share the knowledge because homemade bread is absolutely the best. It's way better for you than the stuff you buy at the store, and it helps that bread gut to not happen as much. So, all right, guys, have an awesome day, and thanks so much for joining me as I taught you how to make artisan bread.